Hey, it's Yay for Yarn, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet some easy Colorblock fingerless gloves. So let's get started. So here is a finished fingerless glove with this Colorblock stripe down the middle. And we're basically just crocheting a rectangle with a stripe. This is very simple. Definitely beginner friendly and something that you can whip out very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I have some Caron Simply Soft. This color is called Cool Green and this is black. And I have a size H crochet hook here. I have a yarn needle. I like the metal ones. Pair of scissors and not very much yarn required to make this. This is not a time-consuming project or a yarn-consuming project. These are very quick and easy. So I'm going to start with my green yarn. And I'm going to start by chaining 33. Alright, so there's my foundation chain. I've chained 33. So now I'm going to skip the first two chains that are closest to my hook, and I'm going to half double crochet in the next 31 chains across. And because we skipped those first two, that's going to count as one half double crochet. That's our quote turning chain, even though it's part of the foundation chain. So we're going to have that chain 2 and a total of 31 half double crochet across this row. Alright, so I have done my 31 half double crochet. That's the end of my first row. So this is what the first row looks like. Now we're going to work row 2. And row 2 is the row that we're going to be repeating for the whole rest of this project. It's very simple. We're going to chain 2 and turn. We're not going to work into this half double crochet that the chain is coming out of, because that chain counts as one stitch, and that is in that stitch right there. So we're going to work into the next stitch after that. But instead of inserting the hook into the stitch the way we normally would, we're going to work in the back loop only. If you don't want to work in the back loop only, you don't have to, but that gives this more rigid texture with the ridges in it, and that also makes the fabric more stretchy and pliable. So I'm going to work in the back loops only. We're going to work our stitch not under the entire stitch, but under only the back strand of yarn, because as you can see there are two strands of yarn that make up that stitch. We're going to work into the one that's furthest away from us all the way across. So I've got my chain 2, I've turned, and I'm going to half double crochet in the back loop only of the next 31 stitches, including this chain space at the end. So we're half double crocheting in 30 half double crochets and then a half double crochet in the top of the chain 2 that we skipped from the row below. And you can see as we work into this back loop that this creates a very nice ridge of texture across the front of the work. Alright, so I'm down at the end here. I've worked 30 half double crochet into the half double crochet from the row below, and I'm going to work a half double crochet in the top of that chain 2 space from the row below. So that is row 2, and if you can work that row 2, then you can do the whole rest of this project, because the entire rest of the project is going to be repeating row 2. So I'm going to repeat row 2 one more time to make a total of 3 rows of half double crochet in the green, and then we're going to change colors. So now we have a total of 3 rows of our green. So we've worked row 1, and then we worked row 2, and row 3 is a repeat of row 2. So now I'm going to cut my yarn, and I'm going to tie off. Now I'm going to switch to black, so I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to join the black. And all I'm going to do that is pull up a loop of yarn in that first stitch. So I'm going to take these two yarn tails from where I ended with the green and started with the black. I'm going to lay them over the top of my work, and I'm going to crochet over them. Now rows 4 through 7 are also repeating row 2. We're just working them in black. So I'm going to repeat row 2 again for rows 4 through 7. Crocheting over my tails, and I am still continuing to work in the back loop only. This whole thing is worked in the back loop only. So as I go across this row, I'm going to be working over those tails, and then that way they're already woven in and I don't have to weave them in later. So I have finished row 7. So if you look at my piece here, I've got 3 rows of green and 4 rows of black. So now I'm going to cut my yarn again, tie it off, and we're going to switch back to green in the same way that we switched to the black. So I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to pull up a loop of yarn, of my green yarn in that first stitch. I'm going to bring my tails over so I can crochet over them, and then I'm just going to continue working my rows. Now I worked a total of, this is row 8, so I worked 8 to 18 in green for a total of 18 rows. If you're making this for someone with larger hands, then you might consider adding a couple extra rows to make sure that it will fit correctly. But this should fit at the correct gauge. If you're working at the correct gauge, this should fit small to average size hands. But if you're making with someone with larger hands, then you can go ahead and add a couple of rows if you like. So I'm going to work rows 8 through 18 in my green. And again, because I just switched colors, I'm crocheting over these tails so I don't have to weave them in later. Alright, so I have finished row 18, and now what we're going to do is cut the yarn, leaving a substantially long tail so that we can use that tail to sew it up. So now I'm going to tie off. So as you can see, we have pretty much a square or a rectangle with a stripe not in the center but off to one side. We have a short tail that we started with, and we have a long tail that we ended with. So doesn't matter which side you use of the fabric, but you're going to need to use one side for the one hand and the other side for the other hand, because here is the one I've already made, and with this one I used this side because, as you can see, we're going to sew up this edge to this edge, leaving a space here for the thumb. And of course we want the stripe to go on the back of the hand. So we're leaving a hole here for the thumb. So what I've done is I've used the short tail to sew this little seam right here and used the long tail to sew the longer part of the seam. So either way, whether you use this side of the fabric or flip it over and use this side, you're going to need to use the short tail at the top where that short seam is going to be. So this is my left glove. So to make the right glove, I want to make sure that when I put this over top of my hand, the short tail is at the top, the stripe goes down the back of my hand, so that when I bring this around like so, and sew this short seam, that the thumb hole will be on the correct side. So now I know which way I'm going to sew this together. Now, again, if you were doing the left hand, which I've already done, then you would flip it back over and sew it together this way. Here's the short tail at the top, the black stripe is going down the back, and etc. But I'm doing the right hand this time. So I flipped it over, I've got my short tail at the top, and I'm going to sew a seam here, and then I'm going to stop it right about here to leave a hole for the thumb. So on this glove right here, my seam at the top is about 1.25 inches long. So I'm going to make sure that when I sew this together that my seam at the top is going to be the same length. And on mine, I sewed my seam 7 stitches in. So I'm going to do the same on this one. I'm going to take this short tail and thread it into my yarn needle. And we're just going to use a simple whip stitch to sew these two edges together. So here's my tail. I'm going to start in the top of this row up here, and I'm going to whip stitch 7 pairs of stitches together. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So there's my little seam at the top. I'm going to tie a knot to secure it so it doesn't come undone. And then I'm going to weave in what's left of this tail. Alright, so I'm just going to trim off the little fuzzy end here. And now we're going to sew the seam at the bottom, and that's going to make the lower portion of the seam. We're going to leave a gap here for the thumb. So on the other glove, my seam is approximately 4 inches long, and it goes across 18 stitches, so I'm going to do the same on this glove. I'm going to take the longer tail and thread it into my yarn needle, and again I'm going to whip stitch these two edges together to create my seam, and it should be the same length as my seam was on the other glove, about 4 inches or 18 stitches long. Alright, so here's my 18th stitch. Now again, if you're making this for someone with larger hands, you might want to leave a little bit bigger thumb hole by making your seam shorter, not going in quite as far when you stitch it up. So again, on this side, I'm going to tie a knot to secure, and I'm going to weave in what's left of this tail. I'm not going to weave in all of it because it's pretty long, but I'm going to go ahead and weave this in. So now I'm just going to trim the excess yarn that I've woven in, and there is my finished pair of fingerless gloves. So here's what they look like on. We have a very thick black stripe down the middle of both of them, and the other side is the green, and on both sides of that stripe we also have green. And when you work in the back loop only, that makes the fabric more flexible, more pliable, and it has more stretch in it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you make this project, let me know how it turns out for you in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, making sure you click the little bell next to the subscribe button to be notified of new videos. Thanks for watching. Bye.